If I told you that just 3 years ago, every single advanced civilization in our galaxy had already written humanity's obituary? What if I told you that species with technology spanning millions of years, beings who had conquered black holes and bent the laws of physics to their will, looked at us and saw nothing but a doomed primitive race destined for extinction? And what if I told you that in less than 18 months, those same ancient civilizations would be bowing their heads in respect, calling us the saviors of the galaxy? Welcome back to Galactic Chronicles, where we dive deep into the most incredible stories of human triumph among the stars. I'm your host, and today we're exploring one of the most jaw-dropping examples of why you should never, ever underestimate human ingenuity. This is the story that proves why the rest of the galaxy learned to fear two simple words: human innovation. But before we jump into this mind-blowing tale, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when humanity faces impossible odds. And if you're already part of our growing family of space story enthusiasts, drop a comment letting me know which part of today's story hits you the hardest. Now, picture this scenario. You're living your life, maybe complaining about traffic or your morning coffee being too cold, when suddenly massive alien ships appear in our skies. But here's the twist. These aren't invaders. They're diplomats, and they're here to deliver the worst news imaginable. The entire galaxy, they tell us, is facing complete annihilation. Not in 1,000 years, not in a century, but in less than 2 years. And according to every calculation, every simulation, every advanced predictive model created by civilizations that make our greatest supercomputers look like pocket calculators, there is absolutely no way to stop it. The Zenthari Empire, rulers of 3 entire star systems, had already begun constructing memorial monuments. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, were preparing their final meditations. The mechanical Nexus Republic had calculated the exact moment of galactic extinction down to the nanosecond. Every single one of these ancient, powerful civilizations had reached the same devastating conclusion. This was the end, and humanity. We were barely a footnote in their databases, a species that had just figured out faster-than-light travel, still fighting wars over resources that these civilizations had made obsolete millions of years ago. To them, we were like cavemen being told that a meteor was going to hit Earth. What could we possibly contribute to solving a crisis that had stumped the greatest minds in galactic history? But here's where this story gets absolutely incredible. While every other species in the galaxy was preparing for the end, while ancient civilizations were saying their goodbyes and accepting their fate, humanity did something that shocked everyone. We looked at this impossible problem, this crisis that had defeated beings with godlike technology and millions of years of experience, and we said 2 words that would echo through galactic history. Hold on. What happened next would rewrite everything the galaxy thought they knew about problem solving, about innovation, and about the untapped potential hiding in the most unexpected places. In the next 18 months, humanity would accomplish something that would make every advanced civilization question everything they thought they understood about intelligence, creativity, and the power of thinking differently. 3 months before humanity learned we weren't alone in the universe, the galaxy's most sophisticated early warning systems began detecting something that would make even immortal beings lose sleep. Deep in the void between galactic arms, ancient sensors that had been monitoring cosmic stability for over 50 million years started registering readings that defied explanation. The first species to notice were the Vorthak, silicon-based lifeforms whose computational abilities were so advanced they could predict solar flares across entire star clusters with perfect accuracy. Their quantum analysis networks, spread across 17 different dimensions, all reached the same terrifying conclusion. Reality itself was beginning to unravel. It started small, almost imperceptible. Tiny pockets of space where the fundamental constants of physics would fluctuate for microseconds, stars that would briefly forget how to fuse hydrogen, planets where gravity would hiccup, causing impossible tidal effects that lasted mere moments but left permanent scars on their surfaces. To most civilizations, these would have been dismissed as measurement errors or equipment malfunctions. But the Vorthak had seen this before, buried deep in their ancestral memory banks. 65 million years ago, in a galaxy far beyond their current borders, the exact same pattern had emerged. Within 2 years of the first detection, that entire galaxy had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind nothing but empty space where billions of star systems had once thrived. The emergency summit called by the Galactic Preservation Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from over 3,000 civilizations gathered in the neutral space of the Harmony Station, a massive construct built inside a hollow moon that served as the galaxy's diplomatic center. Species that had been enemies for millennia sat side by side, their ancient conflict suddenly meaningless in the face of universal extinction. Marcus Webb, a former NASA engineer who had become Earth's first galactic ambassador just 6 weeks earlier, sat in that council chamber feeling completely out of his depth. Around him were beings that had mastered time travel, species that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, and civilizations that had been exploring the cosmos since before Earth's sun had even formed. And here he was, representing a species that had just recently figured out how to keep a space station in orbit. The ethereal prime speaker, a being of pure consciousness that communicated through direct thought transmission, shared their findings with the assembly. The wave of cosmic decay was accelerating, spreading like cracks in a breaking mirror across the fabric of space-time itself. Their calculations showed it would reach the outer rim of their galaxy in exactly 22 months and 14 days. When it arrived, every star, every planet, every form of matter and energy would simply unravel back into primordial chaos. Species after species presented their findings, their desperate attempts at solutions, their increasingly panicked theories about what could be causing this cosmic catastrophe. The Nexus Republic had tried redirecting the course of entire star systems, hoping to outrun the expanding zone of decay. The Zenthari had attempted to create protective barriers using dark matter manipulation. The crystalline hegemony had even experimented with folding space-time itself, trying to hide their worlds in pocket dimensions. Nothing worked. Every solution they tried either failed completely, or worse, seemed to accelerate the decay process. It was as if the universe itself was rejecting their advanced technologies, their million-year-old scientific principles, their godlike abilities to reshape reality. As the hours turned into days of increasingly desperate presentations, Marcus Webb began to notice something that chilled him to the bone. These weren't just advanced civilizations sharing information. These were dying gods, saying their final prayers. The weight of impending doom settled over the galaxy like a suffocating blanket. But nowhere was this despair more evident than among the civilizations that had once considered themselves the undisputed masters of the cosmos. These ancient species, who had spent millions of years believing that their technology and wisdom made them essentially immortal, now found themselves facing a problem that made mockery of everything they thought they knew. The Architect Collective, beings who had literally designed and built entire star systems from scratch, were perhaps the most devastated. For over 40 million years, they had shaped reality according to their will, moving planets like chess pieces and igniting new suns when they needed more energy. Their ring worlds and Dyson spheres were marvels that defied conventional physics, engineering projects so massive and complex that they had become legends even among other advanced civilizations. Yet now, their greatest minds were reduced to helpless observers as their masterpieces began to show signs of the cosmic decay. The Omega Ring, a habitat that encircled an entire star and housed over 2 trillion beings, started experiencing molecular breakdown in its outer sections. The very atoms that formed its crystalline structure were beginning to forget how to hold together. Elder Architect Vexthor, whose individual consciousness was older than Earth's entire geological history, stood before the Emergency Council with something none of them had ever seen before: uncertainty. This being had calculated the exact moment that black holes would evaporate through Hawking radiation, had predicted supernovas thousands of years before they occurred, and had solved mathematical equations that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Now, for the first time in 40 million years, Vexthor's computations were returning results that simply read, "Error. Solution does not exist." The Temporal Syndicate, masters of time manipulation who could step outside the normal flow of causality as easily as walking through a door, had attempted their most desperate gambit yet. They sent their best chrononauts forward in time, hoping to observe a future where the crisis had been resolved and then work backward to discover the solution. But every temporal probe they launched into the future hit an impenetrable wall at exactly the same moment, the point where the cosmic decay would reach the galaxy's core. Beyond that point, there was no future to observe. Time itself would end. Even more disturbing were the reports coming from the Consciousness Archive, a vast digital realm where the uploaded minds of extinct civilizations continued to exist. These digital ghosts, beings who had transcended physical death and existed as pure information, were beginning to experience something impossible. They were forgetting. Ancient knowledge that had been perfectly preserved for millions of years was simply vanishing from their databases. It was as if the cosmic decay was reaching backward through time, unraveling not just the future, but the very concept of permanent knowledge. The Void Walkers, who had learned to survive in the empty spaces between galaxies and could exist in regions where matter itself was sparse, reported something that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. They had discovered that the cosmic decay wasn't just affecting their current galaxy. Deep space observations revealed that dozens of other galaxies were showing similar signs of breakdown. This wasn't a local phenomenon, it was universal in scope. Dr. Zephyr Caney, humanity's chief scientific liaison and a quantum physicist who had barely begun to understand the basics of galactic-level science, watched these presentations with growing horror. Each species that spoke represented knowledge and capabilities that humanity couldn't even dream of achieving. The entropy masters could manipulate the second law of thermodynamics. The singularity shapers could create and control black holes like tools. The matter composers could transmute any element into any other element at the atomic level. Yet every single one of these godlike civilizations was reporting the same devastating conclusion. They were completely powerless to stop what was coming. Worse still, many of their attempted solutions had actually accelerated the decay process, as if the universe was actively punishing them for trying to interfere with its dissolution. As the council sessions dragged on, a terrible pattern emerged. The more advanced a civilization's technology, the more helpless they seemed to be against this cosmic crisis. It was as if their very mastery of universal laws was now working against them, their deep understanding of how reality functioned, becoming a prison that prevented them from seeing solutions that might exist outside their established paradigms. While the greatest minds in galactic history were announcing their surrender to cosmic inevitability, something extraordinary was happening in a small conference room deep within the Harmony Station's diplomatic quarters. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a systems engineer from Mexico who had spent her career fixing impossible problems with limited resources, was staring at the holographic display showing the cosmic decay patterns with an expression that her alien colleagues couldn't quite interpret. "Wait," she said, interrupting a somber discussion between Ambassador Webb and the Zenthari representative. "Can you show me that data visualization again, but this time strip away all the theoretical overlays?" The Zenthari, whose species had been analyzing cosmic phenomena for over 6 million years, looked genuinely confused. Strip away the theoretical frameworks, but without proper analytical context, you would just be looking at raw observational data. It would be meaningless. Humor. "Me," Elena replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls with surprising confidence. As the complex theoretical models and million-year-old scientific interpretations faded away, what remained was something that looked almost primitive by galactic standards. Simple, unfiltered observations of when and where the cosmic decay had been detected. What Elena saw in that raw data would have been invisible to civilizations that had spent eons developing increasingly sophisticated ways to interpret cosmic phenomena. Where they saw confirmation of universal laws breaking down, she saw something entirely different, a pattern that reminded her of cascading system failures she had dealt with in terrestrial power grids. "This isn't random cosmic decay," she announced, her voice cutting through the diplomatic murmur that filled the room. "This is a cascading failure in whatever system maintains universal stability. And if it's a system failure, then it can be fixed." The room fell silent. Ambassador Webb, who had watched Elena solve engineering problems that had stumped entire teams of experts back on Earth, felt a familiar spark of hope. But the alien representatives looked at her with expressions ranging from polite confusion to barely concealed condescension. "With respect, Dr. Rodriguez," the ethereal representative communicated through their thought transmitter, "your species has existed for mere millennia. The concept you are suggesting would require understanding of universal mechanics that have eluded civilizations with millions of years of experience." Elena smiled, a gesture that didn't translate well to most alien species, but carried a meaning that Ambassador Webb recognized immediately. She had found something they had all missed. "That's exactly the point," she said. "You've all spent so long mastering the rules of how the universe works that you can't see when those rules are being broken by something external." Over the next 72 hours, Elena did something that shocked every advanced civilization in the galaxy. Instead of trying to understand the cosmic decay through the lens of established galactic science, she approached it like a maintenance problem. She recruited a team of human engineers, mechanics, and troubleshooters, people whose expertise lay not in theoretical physics, but in the practical art of fixing things that were broken. Jake Morrison, a former automotive engineer from Detroit, looked at the cosmic decay data and immediately recognized what he called substrate failure, the kind of breakdown that happened when the foundations supporting a complex system began to deteriorate. Sarah Kim, a network administrator from Seoul, identified what appeared to be recursive error propagation, a cascade of failures where each breakdown triggered additional breakdowns in connected systems. But it was Tom Chen, a maintenance supervisor from a nuclear power plant in California, who made the observation that would change everything. "You know what this looks like to me," he said, pointing at the expanding pattern of cosmic decay. "This looks like what happens when you have a coolant leak in a closed-loop system. The question isn't how to stop the decay. The question is, what's supposed to be cooling the universe down, and why isn't it working anymore?" The concept was so simple, so fundamental, that every advanced civilization had completely overlooked it. They had been focused on the symptoms, the breakdown of physical laws, the unraveling of matter and energy, without considering that there might be an underlying infrastructure that maintained cosmic stability, and that infrastructure might simply need repair. Within a week, the human team had developed what they called the universal maintenance hypothesis, the theory that the cosmos operated on principles similar to any complex system, with built-in mechanisms for self-regulation and stability that could malfunction over time, sir. And if those mechanisms were failing, the solution wasn't to fight against the decay, but to identify and repair the cosmic infrastructure that was supposed to prevent it. The galaxy's reaction to this hypothesis ranged from skeptical interest to outright dismissal. But Ambassador Webb had learned to trust human ingenuity, especially when it came from people who made their living fixing impossible problems with whatever tools they had available. The first sign that humanity might be onto something came from the most unexpected source, the Nexus Republic's Quantum Analysis Division. These mechanical beings, whose computational power exceeded anything in the known galaxy, had initially dismissed the human universal maintenance hypothesis as primitive thinking. But when they ran Elena Rodriguez's substrate failure models through their most advanced simulation systems, something unprecedented happened. Their computers actually found viable solutions. For the first time in 18 months of galactic crisis, advanced alien technology was producing results that weren't catastrophic predictions or error messages. The Nexus Republic's lead analyst, a synthetic consciousness-designated prime calculation unit 7749, experienced something its programmers had never designed it to feel: surprise. The human hypothesis generates solution pathways that our previous models classified as impossible. PCU 7749, announced to an emergency session of the Galactic Preservation Council. Their framework suggests that universal stability is maintained by what they term cosmic infrastructure, fundamental systems that regulate the basic forces of reality. According to their calculations, this infrastructure can be repaired using techniques analogous to what humans call emergency maintenance protocols. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled civilizations. The architect collective, who had spent millions of years building megastructures that spanned solar systems, suddenly realized they might have been thinking too small. The ethereal beings, masters of consciousness and thought, found themselves contemplating the possibility that the universe itself might have a kind of consciousness that required care and maintenance. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Chen's nuclear engineering background led to a stunning insight. During his analysis of cosmic background radiation patterns, he noticed something that billions of years of alien science had categorized as normal universal background noise. Subtle, rhythmic fluctuations that occurred on a scale so vast that they were only detectable when viewed across galactic distances. "It's a heartbeat," Chen announced during what would later be remembered as the most important scientific presentation in galactic history. "The universe has a heartbeat, and it's getting weaker." The implications were staggering. If Chen was correct, then the cosmic decay wasn't a natural phenomenon or an inevitable end to reality. It was the symptom of a failing universal life support system, something that had been maintaining cosmic stability for billions of years, but was now breaking down due to age, damage, or simple wear and tear. Elena Rodriguez, working with a hastily assembled team of human engineers and increasingly interested alien scientists, began developing what they called the Cosmic Repair Protocol. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to stop the decay through advanced technology or godlike power, they would treat the universe like any other complex system that needed maintenance. The plan required identifying the locations where this cosmic infrastructure was failing, accessing those locations despite them existing in dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive, and then performing what amounted to universal-scale emergency repairs using principles that any Earth-based maintenance engineer would recognize. The Temporal Syndicate, whose mastery of time manipulation made them the galaxy's experts on cause and effect relationships, ran Chen's heartbeat hypothesis through their most sophisticated chronological models. The results were both terrifying and hopeful. They could trace the weakening of this cosmic heartbeat back over millions of years, but the degradation had accelerated dramatically in the last several thousand years. More importantly, their models suggested that if the infrastructure could be stabilized, the cosmic decay could not only be stopped, but potentially reversed. However, the repair protocol faced one massive obstacle. The cosmic infrastructure existed in what humans had termed substrate space, a dimensional layer that existed beneath normal reality, where the fundamental forces that governed physics were generated and regulated. Accessing this substrate, space required technology that could manipulate reality at its most basic level, capabilities that even the most advanced galactic civilizations had never developed because they had never imagined such infrastructure existed. That's when the void walkers, the enigmatic beings who existed in the empty spaces between galaxies, made an announcement that changed everything. They had been monitoring the human discussions with growing interest, and they possessed something that no other civilization had: the ability to exist in substrate space naturally. We have always known of the deep infrastructure, their representative, communicated through crystalline resonance patterns that translated roughly to awe-tinged reverence. We have walked among the foundation structures of reality for eons, but we never understood their purpose. We assumed they were natural formations, like cosmic mountains or valleys in the fabric of existence. We never realized they were machines that required maintenance. The partnership that formed between humanity's practical problem-solving approach and the Void Walkers' unique dimensional abilities would prove to be the key to saving not just the galaxy, but the universe itself. But first, they had to convince the rest of galactic civilization to trust a plan that had been developed by a species that had only learned of their existence 6 months earlier. The moment that would forever change how the galaxy viewed humanity occurred at coordinates that didn't exist in normal space, in a dimension that most civilizations had never imagined, as Elena Rodriguez guided the first-ever universal maintenance operation in cosmic history. Working alongside Voidwalker entities, whose names couldn't be pronounced in any conventional language, Rodriguez found herself standing, if the concept of standing had any meaning in substrate space, before structures so vast and ancient that they made galactic superclusters look like scattered pebbles. These were the universe's life support systems, the cosmic equivalent of the massive pumps and filters that keep a nuclear power plant stable, except they had been running without maintenance for over 13 billion years. Jake, are you seeing this? Rodriguez's voice crackled through the dimensional communication array that the Nexus Republic had hastily constructed for this unprecedented mission. Back in normal space, Jake Morrison was monitoring the universal infrastructure through sensor, readings that showed mechanical systems larger than solar systems, all showing the same diagnostic pattern he had seen in countless failing machines back on Earth. Eleanor, I'm reading massive bearing failure in what looks like the primary stability regulation system, Morrison replied, his automotive engineering experience translating perfectly to cosmic-scale machinery. The whole thing's been running on emergency power for probably millions of years. We need to do a complete rebuild of the core stabilization matrix. What followed was perhaps the most surreal maintenance operation in the history of existence. Elena Rodriguez, using principles she had learned fixing Earth's power grids, began directing repairs on machinery that controlled the fundamental constants of physics. Tom Chen, applying nuclear engineering safety protocols, established containment, procedures that prevented reality from destabilizing, while essential cosmic systems were offline for maintenance. Sarah Kim treated the universal infrastructure like the world's largest computer network, rerouting cosmic processes through backup systems while primary channels were restored. The Voidwalkers, who had spent eons walking among these structures, without understanding their purpose, proved to be invaluable partners. Their natural ability to exist in substrate space allowed them to access components that would have been impossible for normal matter to reach. But it was their childlike wonder at finally understanding their role in cosmic maintenance that provided the emotional foundation for this unprecedented collaboration. We have been the universe's unknowing caretakers for so long, their primary representative communicated as they guided human repair teams to critical system nodes. We walked among these great machines like children playing in a vast factory, never realizing that our presence was keeping them minimally functional. Now finally, we understand our purpose. The repair operation took 6 months of constant work, with human engineering teams working in shifts around the clock while alien civilizations provided support, materials, and increasingly enthusiastic assistance. The Architect Collective contributed manufacturing capabilities to create replacement components on a cosmic scale. The Nexus Republic provided computational power to simulate the effects of each repair before implementation. The Temporal Syndicate established causal buffers to prevent paradoxes while fundamental systems were modified. But it was humanity's approach to problem-solving that made the difference. While alien civilizations had spent millions of years developing increasingly sophisticated theories about how the universe worked, humans approached cosmic maintenance with the same practical mindset they brought to fixing broken cars, repairing power plants, and maintaining computer networks. The moment when the universal infrastructure came back online was felt across every dimension of existence. Stars that had been flickering back to full brightness, planets that had been experiencing gravitational anomalies suddenly stabilized. The fabric of space-time itself seemed to take a deep, relieved breath as the cosmic decay not only stopped, but began reversing. The universal heartbeat that Tom Chen had detected, which had been growing weaker for millions of years, suddenly strengthened to a steady, powerful rhythm that resonated through substrate space like the most beautiful music ever heard. Reality itself was healthy again. In the aftermath of the successful repair operation, something unprecedented happened. In galactic politics, The Galactic Preservation Council, which had been dominated by ancient civilizations for millions of years, unanimously voted to establish the Human Engineering Corps as the official maintenance division for universal infrastructure. A species that had been dismissed as primitively young just 18 months earlier was now recognized as the guardians of cosmic stability. Ambassador Webb, watching the celebration broadcasts from civilizations across the galaxy, received a communication from Elder Architect Vexthor that would have been unthinkable before the crisis. Ambassador Webb, the ancient being transmitted, the Architect Collective formally requests that humanity consider establishing a permanent presence in our star systems. We have spent 40 million years building marvels, but we now realize we never learned how to maintain them. Your species possesses wisdom that we have never developed. We need teachers. Similar requests came from every major civilization in the galaxy. The species that had once looked down on humanity as inexperienced newcomers were now asking to learn from human engineers, mechanics, and maintenance specialists. Universities that had existed for millions of years began establishing human studies programs focused on practical problem-solving methodologies. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy's ancient civilizations had spent eons believing that advanced technology and sophisticated theories were the highest forms of intelligence. The universal maintenance crisis had taught them that sometimes the most important wisdom was knowing how to fix things when they broke, and that the youngest civilization in the galaxy had mastered something far more valuable than godlike power: the simple, practical knowledge of how to make things work. As we reach the end of this incredible story, I want you to think about what just happened here. The most advanced civilizations in galactic history, beings with technology that could manipulate time and space, species that had transcended physical existence and achieved what most would consider godhood, were completely helpless against a crisis that threatened universal extinction. Yet humanity, the youngest and supposedly most primitive species in the galaxy, solved it using principles that any Earth-based maintenance worker would recognize. This isn't just a story about cosmic engineering or universal infrastructure. This is a story about the power of perspective, the value of practical experience, and why sometimes being the newest voice in the room gives you the greatest advantage. While ancient civilizations were trapped by millions of years of established thinking, humanity approached the problem with fresh eyes and simple questions. What's broken? How do we fix it? What tools do we have available? The lesson here goes far beyond science fiction. How often in our own lives, in our businesses, in our communities, do we encounter problems that seem impossibly complex because we're looking at them through the lens of established methods and conventional wisdom? How often do we dismiss simple solutions because they don't sound sophisticated enough for complicated problems? The galaxy learned something profound from humanity during that crisis. Intelligence isn't just about how much you know or how advanced your technology is. True intelligence is about adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to question assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. It's about approaching problems with humility and practical thinking rather than trying to impress others with theoretical complexity. But there's another layer to this story that I find even more inspiring. Notice how the solution required collaboration between humanity and the Void Walkers, between human engineering principles and alien capabilities. The Void Walkers had spent eons walking among universal infrastructure without understanding its purpose, while humans had the maintenance knowledge but lacked access to substrate space. Neither species could have solved the crisis alone. This reflects something beautiful about human nature, our instinct to build partnerships, to find common ground with beings completely unlike ourselves, and to combine different strengths to achieve something greater than the sum of our parts. While other civilizations were paralyzed by their individual limitations, humanity immediately began looking for ways to collaborate and share knowledge. The story also highlights why diversity of thought and experience is so crucial when facing unprecedented challenges. The human team that saved the universe wasn't composed of theoretical physicists or advanced researchers. It was automotive engineers, nuclear plant supervisors, network administrators, and power grid technicians. People whose value was often overlooked even on Earth suddenly became the most important individuals in galactic history. Today, as we face our own seemingly impossible challenges, climate change, technological disruption, social inequality, geopolitical tensions, we can draw inspiration from this tale. Sometimes the solutions to our most complex problems aren't hidden in advanced theories or cutting-edge technology. Sometimes they're found in basic principles applied with creativity, practical experience combined with fresh perspective, and the willingness to try approaches that others have dismissed as too simple. The galaxy thought humanity was doomed because we were young, inexperienced, and lacked sophisticated technology. Instead, our youth gave us flexibility. Our inexperience meant we weren't trapped by old assumptions, and our lack of godlike technology forced us to develop practical problem-solving skills that proved more valuable than any advanced capability. So, the next time someone tells you a problem is impossible, or that you're not qualified to contribute because you lack experience or credentials, remember Elena Rodriguez staring at raw cosmic data and seeing patterns that million-year-old civilizations had missed. Remember Tom Chen recognizing universal infrastructure failure because it reminded him of problems he had solved at a nuclear plant. Remember that sometimes the most important qualification for solving impossible problems is simply being willing to look at them differently. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through one of the most inspiring stories of human achievement among the stars. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button, subscribe for more amazing tales from the cosmos, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below and let me know which part of humanity's cosmic triumph inspired you the most. Next week, we're diving into another mind-blowing HFY story about what happens when humans introduce the concept of improvisation to a galaxy that has spent millions of years following rigid protocols. Trust me, you won't want to miss how human creativity turns galactic military strategy completely upside down. Until then, remember, never underestimate the power of thinking differently, never dismiss the value of practical experience, and always believe that human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle the universe throws at us. Keep looking up, keep dreaming big, and keep believing in the incredible potential of human innovation. I'll see you in the next cosmic adventure.